good afternoon and welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming. Jackie would be so thrilled that you all made the effort to spend your Sunday afternoon with us. I just wish she was here to participate with us, and she'd be so thrilled with that program that all us girls slaved over with 3,000 proofing comments back and forth, and you really do have to read it. That wasn't a joke, Katie. Read. So my name is the other Jackie. I am Jackie Slater. And Jackie named me the other Jackie because when we'd have cocktail parties and dinner parties, Jackie this, Jackie that, and it drove us crazy. So I became the other Jackie, or as Henty knows me with her mother, Slater. So you can call me Slater or the other Jackie, or if you want to know my real name, it's Jackie Slater. So as a member of Hampshire's founding class in 1970, I want to welcome you to the Red Barn, and I want to welcome you to Hampshire. This is the perfect place for Jackie's memorial service because the original five-college office, or five-college consortium, I think we called it in those old days, was right next door in Blair, better known as Blair Hall. And I met Jackie in the conference room of Blair Hall because I was a financial aid student at Hampshire College. And one of my many jobs was washing dishes and cleaning up after five college meetings. Well, if you thought they ended on time, you got to be out of your mind. You know how long faculty can talk, let alone about cooperating or things they don't want to do? And Jackie would just keep it moving and going and grooving. So I became the five college eavesdropper. I came to be the dishwasher, but I ended up being the eavesdropper because I listened to all these meetings and I got a great insight into the faculty and the different institutions and the future of five college cooperation. So I got a lot of blackmail on all of you. And I will not go on about this. I formally met Jackie Pritzen and North Byrne. North was the first five college coordinator, very strong, charismatic guy. And Jackie was a very balanced, very educated woman. And they both interviewed me, and the interviews were so different, you couldn't imagine. But they both said the same thing to me, because they were focused on my resume, and more importantly, they were focused on the fact that I had a full, all-paid scholarship to Columbia Graduate School, and they thought I was out of my mind. And they did not hesitate to tell me in their own sweet, not subtle ways, I was crazy, I was out of my mind, I should use the scholarship, I had no money, I had student loans, and it wasn't going to come again. Columbia made it very clear it was not going to come again. Well, I fought them like hell. I mean, this went on for weeks. They called me, they brought me back. North had the incense to call me at my mother's house. Gail, imagine that. When I was home on vacation, and I had a big doo-ha with him at my mother's house. My mother's like, what are you talking about? You have a full scholarship? Oh, you never told me that. I said, because I was determined to be a five college fellow. And I was determined for many reasons. And my argument didn't go over so well with Jackie, but it went over well with North. I said, this is like a mini security council. You got five separate entities, they all have veto power, nobody trusts each other, and they don't want to cooperate. Like they'll do anything not to cooperate. So North, being a former Foreign Service officer for his whole career, he started to crack a little bit. Jackie never cracked. She said, go to Columbia, you'll be bored. You'll be bored. And of course, Jackie made sure I was not bored by inviting me to dinners and cocktail parties and introducing me to her wonderful friends that I'm still friends with, and many are here today. So she made sure I was not bored. So, of course, I have something prepared. What is it? So when I interviewed with them, I did not tell them I was the five college eavesdropper or the five college dishwasher. I was on my corporate life to not disclose these little secrets, nor did they ask. But anyway, my year as a five college fellow brought many, many friendships to my life that have been long life friendships. And one of them was with Ruth Beebe in the office and Mary Field. They were wonderful, supportive people, not only to me personally, but to North and Jackie. And I'm telling you, for those of you who are young snipsters here, without these people, there would be no five college cooperation. They worked tirelessly and patiently, and they put up with everything, including me, Ruth, which probably was not easy. And we owe them all a great deal of thanks, and I just want to honor Ruth Beebe here today and say thank you. We all needed you. Well, that's a nice thing to say. You can tell me something different later. So I became very close friends with Jackie and with North. I shared cocktails, I had meals with them, and we shared endless stories about everything into the world. And I met Jackie's friends, and she was such a terrific cook. To have dinner with Jackie and her friends, or even just with Jackie, she used every dish, every pot, every pan. It was like the kitchen was like a bomb hit it. But everything came out beautiful, and I can't cook, so I was thrilled. And that's why my experience as a 5-college dishwasher really came in handy. For these dinner Jackie, because she was not about to do the dishes after this, she was sitting down and letting, I think what she called the air out of her tires in the big chair in the living room at that point, if you get my drift. And there were many, many stories about Lorna Peterson and Carol Angus and Carol Ailman, and I feel like I know all of you intimately, but I never talked to you, I never met you, and this whole barrage of email over the last few weeks about the program, I now have sort of gotten to know you, and you're just as wonderful as Jackie always said. And not that I ever doubted that, but now I have my own Jackie experience, the Jackie Slater experience of experiencing you. And I can't wait to have a hug and a glass of wine to tell you that in person later. But I got to get moving because I promised we wouldn't talk too long. Now I have a couple of little stories here. Jackie and I'm going to leave all the serious stuff for you guys because you have your PhDs and you're serious. I'm just going to tell a couple of stories. Jackie and I spoke frequently about sports. Now, I would always like to talk about Roger Federer and how beautiful he was and how great he played tennis and he beat Andy Murray, and we'd go on because she loved Roger too. But before I knew it, the conversation had completely switched to the Boston Red Sox. Every single time, no matter what we started to talk about, before I knew it, I'm discussing the Boston Red Sox. Well, I know nothing about the Boston Red Sox. I live in Manhattan, better known as New York. What would I know about the Boston? Well, every personal injury, every pitching decision, every this, every that, in the most minute detail. She could have been an archivist for the Boston Red Sox. She would have won that job hands down. And to this day, I know more about the Boston Red Sox than any person living in New York City, I can guarantee you. The only thing I feel bad about is she missed them winning the World Series. But she might have had the best seat in the house. You never know about these things. She might have made it happen. I'm very superstitious is the right word. But I feel bad that she missed it just by a month. But, these things happen. So we also spoke endlessly about politics. I'm sure many of you talked about politics too. Jackie was a complete fanatic on every form of politics there is. Politics of an English department at an unnamed college, for example. Now, why are all the people from Smith laughing here? What? You noticed who laughed at that comment. The politics of a campus, a president, the deans, the state of Massachusetts, the governor, the senator races, God forbid, the presidential races. Talk about having departure, whatever you call them, after Obama was elected. I could barely call her. It's like she was such a political junkie. What am I going to do now? And then we got into Elizabeth Warren, and she went nuts when Elizabeth Warren was elected, thank God. I didn't really want to hear if she didn't, and I was thrilled too. So Jackie was always, I'm sure you talked politics with her too, but that was another tremendous passion. Everything was intense and passionate with Jackie. Her generosity, her wisdom, and her great sense of humor informed everything she did, professionally and personally. That was Jackie. And for many years, I visited Jackie on New Year's for a few days. And Hendy was Jackie's best friend in college. They were English majors together. They were overly bright at the University of Oregon, and their favorite professor, forced them to go on to graduate school and become, well-educated, famous people. And it was an amazing day for me. I wanted a Bloody Mary, I wanted an omelet, I wanted to eat brunch. And the two of them were glued to the TV analyzing the Rose Parade. Every float, every flower, every wheel, every float mechanism. On and on, the colors, now it shouldn't be green, it should be yellow, it should be, on and on and on. I'm like, what's going on with you girls? Like, you're so serious about this. You know, don't you want to have eggs? Don't you want to eat? I mean, we're here for the game, aren't we? Oh no, we're here for the parade. So then the game comes on and it gets either worse or better. They're analyzing every play. You know, they shouldn't have passed. They shouldn't have punted. The fourth down, they got the wrong, they missed the tackle. They're calling the penalties before the refs do. I'm like, what goes with these two? I got to come back. It was amazing. They were better than any sportscaster ever imagined to be, before or after, and it just went on all day. So I went back. Hendy's daughter's with us today. You'll hear more from Katie about her experiences with Jackie, but I just wanted to throw that in terms of my sports analogy of Jackie Pritzen. Hendy this is Jackie's best friend from college. Hendy had the good sense to appoint Jackie as the guardian of her daughter, Katie, who's with us today. And Katie and her daughter, Corey, and I are the unofficial adopted family of Jackie Pritzen. And although we don't see each other often, and I hardly recognize you today because I remember you when you were so young, and it's just amazing. And Katie will speak right after me about some memories about Hendy and Jackie. I want to be serious for a couple of minutes here that Jackie was a very important and a very significant friend to me from 1974 until the day she died. And I was with her the day she died, with another close friend of mine, Claudette Mayer. We drove up early in the morning, and it was clear that things were not going to go well. And so we serenaded her with our favorite song that we used to sing together, the chorus of You Are My Sunshine. And Jackie used to love to harmonize with that song all the time. So if she was not harmonizing with us, we were trying to harmonize with each other, and I'm not a very good singer. But Jackie loved it, and although she couldn't open her eyes, and she couldn't speak, and she had all kinds of things, she squeezed my hand very, very tightly. And I think that was a really way of acknowledging that I was there and that it was a little final goodbye. And although I feel sad that she's gone, I feel great that we were with her on that day and that she wasn't alone. And then some other friends came and we had it was a nice ending. I'm sorry. Sorry, I said I'd be serious. Enough for being serious. So I feel a little bad that I can't just pick up the phone and call Jackie and talk about sports or politics or these endless Pritzen conversations. They just go on forever, but we can't pick up the phone anymore. But I'm still talking to her in my head. I don't give up. It's just like 5 colleges. I still talk to her all the time. You probably do too. Now I made you cry. Now you can't talk. Now I screwed up. I'm sorry. I screwed up. So I want to close by being polite to Neil and thank him and thank 5 colleges for everything you did to help set up the Jackie Pritzen Fund. This is a fund set up to carry on the work that Jackie Pritzen cared most about. It's in your program on the last page, and there are many people here who contributed to that fund that I want to personally thank, and you are making her work continue. And I think it's a great benefit not only to Jackie, but to all of us still involved with 5 colleges. And Neil and 5 colleges made it happen. He came to New York, we had a lovely meeting, and I'm very thankful, Neil. I also want to thank Lorna Peterson, Carol Angus, and Carol Ailman for helping, doing everything. Lining up the speakers for today, doing the obituary in August when we were all discombobulated to do this commemorative program. You have no idea how much they proved and cared and worked on this. And I was such a very tiny part of the team, but I can't tell you how wonderful it was to be back working with 5 colleges again. I felt like a kid again, although I got a little pissed off that it took so long, but because I did the first 5 college course listing and stuff like that. So I was back in the publication business. So I have a little aside here, and that is my family is carrying on the 5 college tradition because my niece is here today. you could stand up a little bit. You look very presentable, unlike me in my sweatshirt. And this is Gail Holt, and she is the director of financial aid at Amherst College. And prior to that, she worked at Mount Holyoke College. And I hope for Hampshire's sake that someday she will work at Hampshire College and straighten it all out. And I am so pleased that she's here with us today to share this experience. We were talking on the phone the other day. I said, everybody takes Five College Cooperation for granted. The bus system, the courses, the interdisciplinary certificates, what are they, 15 now or something? So I was hitchhiking to Mount Holyoke. I mean, there was nothing. You have no idea the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this. Right, Ruth? Right. All right. So thank you for your many, many kindnesses to me personally, all of you, and for those I have not mentioned. And I'd now like to introduce Katie Joyce, who's Hendy's daughter, who spent many holidays with Jackie to give some of her personal memories. And I'm sorry I made you cry.
Hi. I don't know that I'll be as eloquent as Jackie, but I'll do my best to share some of my fondest memories. As Jackie said, I'm Katie Joyce. I'm the adopted family of Jackie Pritzen. I want to thank you all for coming, donating to her fund, and paying your respects to her memory and what she dedicated her career to. What she understood about how to make people come together for a greater good is pretty humbling to me. The 5 colleges were unique when they started. I remember, I was a little girl around the table listening. And when I was old enough to understand and ask her, what do you do? And she sat down and explained to me how political I was like 13, how political universities are and how difficult it was to get them, that they wanted their own money and they wanted their own acknowledgement, and to get those people to coordinate and agree to give up some of their power to have a greater program. I was awestruck. And then she'd travel around the country and she'd teach other schools, and she explained to me how difficult it was. Other people were looking at 5 colleges and going, they are amazing, how can we do this? And she really tried to help people understand how to do that, and it always impressed me. What she helped build here is unlike anywhere else in this country, and I've been really proud to know her and about it. My mother and Jackie were very close all their lives. I would call them sisters of the heart. They met in college, sharing the professor of Renaissance literature that they both loved, both the professor and the literature. It's what joined them initially. Their mutual love of good books, cooking, and fine food shared with good company. Sports, jigsaw puzzles, and very in particular, for those of you who know, crossword puzzles made them very good friends. I spent every Christmas, New Year's, Easter's, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, and Thanksgiving with Jake. That's my mother's nickname for her. She was Hendy, and Jackie was Jake. And Jake's brilliant friend, Peggy Shook. They were the beloved aunts of my childhood. My mother was an only child. I was not close to my father. But Jackie and Peggy were there. Every holiday, every birthday. For as long as I can remember, Jackie had gifts for me. Maple sugar. When I was a little girl, there was always a 4-pack of maple sugar leaves on the table. I couldn't wait to go visit Jackie because I was going to get maple sugar. For those of you, I don't know whether all of you or any of you know about Grandma Pritzen's pickles, but Grandma Barbara, her mother, who was my grandma, made these pickles. They took 10 days to make. They were this elaborate thing to do, and they had to be a very specific teensy-weensy pickle that were cut up into perfect slices. And I love those pickles so much that every holiday she would bring a couple jars, and I would be like waiting by the table for the olives and the pickles to come out. And every Christmas I had a jar in my stocking. I still hold that recipe, and I hope that someday I'll make them in honor of her and her mother. And if there's anybody out there who really wants it, I can dig it out and find it for you. But it's 10 days worth of work. Every birthday and Christmas, Jackie and Peggy would give me books that I devoured as well. The Chronicles of Narnia, Little Women, Secret Garden, The Trumpet of the Swan, The Once and Future King, all the Tolkien novels. I'm a fantasy sci-fi freak. I read them all the time, and it's because of them. Also historical novels. I became crazy about them because of my childhood books. And then later, Nia Marsh, Agatha Christie, P.D. James, Dick Francis, they became my close friends because Jackie, Peggy, and my mother are avid mystery devotees. I don't know whether you know, but there's like 100 paperback books of every mystery writer there ever was, and I would devour. I was an only child. I would just start reading every book. I've read every Nia Marsh, every Agatha Christie, and it was all because of them. I treasure those memories so much that when Jackie asked me what she could give my daughter, I begged her and Peggy, because Peggy would also do a lot of the research for the perfect young adult books, Katie will really love this. I begged them to buy books for my daughter. So every Christmas, every birthday for my daughter, I would get a box of books. And Peggy would go so far as to write a book and draw pictures and go out and buy stuffed animals that matched the pictures. And I have those, and I treasure those, and my daughter treasures those. And we have a love of books because of them. Weekends, besides holidays, were often spent together. Every New York Times magazine was saved for these weekends. My mother and I, and often a girlfriend of mine, would drive up from Putnam County in New York and to Northampton on a Friday night, and Jackie and Peggy and my mother would immediately start on the New York Times crossword puzzles. Acrostics were their particular favorites, unless, of course, the theme of the main puzzle was done by a very clever person. Then they would laugh over those clues, and you could hear Peggy just going, "Oh, that rotten!" Just so fond memories. I can still hear them laughing. And puzzles were done during football games, baseball games, and most other sports. Tennis, Olympics, golf, college ball of any kind was always on my television. And Sunday evenings were reserved for 60 Minutes and then later Masterpiece Theater. Poldark, Upstairs, Downstairs, The Duchess of Duke Street. They were my introductions to historical fiction, and they all loved them and discussed them in detail. I mean, I remember chatting with Jackie on the phone about Poldark when I was a child. We were public television nuts. And jigsaw puzzles would get broken out during this, because one person could read the clue, and Peggy could yell out what it was, or my mother. Usually it was my mother or Pritzen sitting at the table reading out the clues, and the rest of us doing these jigsaw puzzles and hand you, what color are you collecting? You collecting orange? I'm doing blues. This is your butterfly. That really just was the fondest memories of my childhood. Those weekends were among the fondest memories I have because it was three brilliant women enjoying wordsmiths and each other. My mother and Jackie also collected gourmet magazines. As Slater can attest to, she begged her for, a decade or so to please get rid of the ones you don't need. I have probably 300 recipes cut out from Gourmet magazine. They shared a love of fine food and cooking. When my mother died, I was only 16, and Jackie was my guardian. So in my 20s and 30s, when I needed to cook something, who do you call? You call your mom. And I'd pick up the phone, and I'd say, how do I make stuffing? How do I cook a turkey? And she'd be right there. Well, what size turkey is it? All right, well, you could take apples, and if you take the raisins and plump them up in apple cider, if you're going to use wine, she was always there. I would not call her for weeks. I was so self-absorbed. And then I'd pick up the phone and say, well, how do you cook a pork roast? And she would tell me. My mother's handwriting when I was growing up was so bad, she did almost all her written communications, even the briefest missives on a Selectric 2 typewriter, if you remember those. So at the age of 9 or so, when my handwriting was shaping up to rival hers, Jackie spent hours encouraging me to improve my script. She taught me to write, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," a sentence that uses every letter of the alphabet. I have written that sentence as a doodle so many times, even in my adult life. It has become the symbol of my power to improve myself with practice. As a grown woman, and embarrassingly not one to pay close attention to the news, I would visit Jackie and be educated about any subject I wanted to understand. As Slater mentioned, Jake's political knowledge is unequaled in my world. She could explain events over a 40-year period. I mean, she'd go back to Nixon and to explain to me who each person was still today and how they impacted each other right up to the present. I don't know anybody who knew as much as she did. I was constantly impressed with the width and breadth of her knowledge. She was one woman I never tired of speaking with, and I do regret all the future missed opportunities to speak with her. That is my greatest loss. She'll be missed by all of us, particularly for me, because she was my mother and my grandmother of my adult life. She was my mother's truest friend, and her presence in my life was an unstinting constant of love and support that helped assuage my sense of being orphaned and gave me the stability I needed to grow up and grow past my childhood losses. If she was here right now, I'd tell her I miss her and I love her, and I wish she was still here. Thank you.
Jackie Pritzen and I met in the fall of 1952 at Yale University, where we had both enrolled as first-year students in the graduate program in English. She had come from the faraway West Coast. I had been living in New York City after resigning from an instructorship at Smith College. At that time, every student in the program had to take a one-year course in Anglo-Saxon, or Old English, as we call it at Yale. Old English, as you may know, is a quite different language from our English of today. It is highly inflected, like Latin, with case endings for nouns and an elaborate system of verbs differentiated into two major classes, weak and strong, each having tenses with sets of endings for first, second, and third person in singular and plural, indicative and subjunctive. Here, without having anticipated it in the least, I fell in love. I loved every single case ending, every tense, every one of the 7 classes of strong verbs. The passion was to last me the rest of my life and shape my pedagogical and scholarly career. Nor did it occur to me that everybody else didn't feel exactly the same. Thus it was that 9 months later, as all of us first-year students were scanning our copies of the final examination in Old English that had been handed out, I heard a low growl coming from the seat next to mine. "Wipe that smile off your face." It was Jackie, of course, with whom I had by then become linked in a beautiful friendship. That friendship made all the difference in my life at Yale, which, despite my love of my studies and my achievements in them, would otherwise have been lonely and bleak. Looking back at the great gift Jackie gave me, I see in it at least 3 components: warmth, humor, and understanding. Usually, at least 2 of the 3 came in a delightful mix. I'll cite one example that came back to me as I was composing these remarks. In 1964, after teaching 5 years in the Yale English department, I became a tenured professor. I was one of 2 women who simultaneously broke the gender barrier in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, a faculty over 500 strong and, needless to say, entirely male. Shortly after the announcement was published, a photograph of me taken outdoors at the end of the day when I was feeling and looking rather frazzled and blousy was published probably in the student-run Yale Daily News. Jackie got hold of a copy of it and presented it to me adorned with a fake caption reading, "Well, I made it, but Lordy, I'm tired." I have a feeling that a number of those present here are fellow beneficiaries of Jackie's warmth and wit. But long before that, we had many wonderful times together, laughing and enjoying bouts of what we and our friends called food reveling in the basement kitchen of the graduate women's dormitory. The spirit of these times is reflected in a little poem I wrote and sent to Jackie shortly after I had left New Haven to teach again at Smith. I think it will make a suitable conclusion to these thoughts. A little background. As an instructor, I was teaching 3 sections of freshman English, each of over 20 students, in which they all wrote a paper every 2 weeks. That day, I was trying, as usual, to catch up on my grading, and Jackie was back at Yale reading up on late 16th century prose. The prose of that era, as you may know, was made almost unreadably elaborate by ornamental flourishes called rhetorical, loaded onto every sentence. This was notably the case in the prose narratives of John Lyly, which Jackie happened to be studying at that time. It's a Sunday for casseroles and capers. There's a sun like a big yellow rose. And here's me with my face in my papers, and there's you with your nose in your prose. I'd prefer something potent and chilly for our Sunday pre-prandial digestion. Tell me, where is the thrill in John Lyly? Or is that a rhetorical question? Well, enough of this fit of the vapors. I could go on for hours, heaven knows. But I ought to get back to my papers, and I've kept you too long from your prose. So here's to more casseroles and capers when the time comes around, as it shall. In the meantime, we'll stick to our prose and our papers and shore up each other's morale. After 60 years, Jackie, I'm still grateful. Thank you.
That's a very hard act to follow. It's hard enough to imagine what on earth I could contribute to this service in remembrance. But one thing I've already learned is that Jackie had a determination to survive. If she was indeed such a good cook, how did she survive all those hundreds of bad sandwiches that I've witnessed her eating at countless meetings at 5 colleges? So that's pretty, another remarkable skill on her part. I'm Kiki Smith. I'm from the theater department at Smith. There's a couple of my colleagues in the Valley have written some wonderful comments about their memories of Jackie in here. I go back to when I was a real pipsqueak. I was about 26. I was back teaching at Smith, my alma mater, and because of how completely incapable our department was of governing itself, I, as an instructor, was named department chair. Shows you how bad it was. And I think I must have been interviewed in the College Sophian, and I think in there I expressed some kind of curiosity and interest to get to know some of my colleagues in the other Valley schools. Lickety-split, Pat Murphy and Jackie Pritzen had plucked me up and brought me to their office, and I was in great hands ever since. Both Julian and Len have some great memories of those meetings that she's worked through. I think what I want to emphasize, and I'll bring this up slightly at the end of these brief remarks, was how much I am grateful for her support of the performing arts. We can tend to be the ugly stepchildren in a very traditional academic community. And this woman gave us a sense of recognition and dignity that was hard to find, and for which I'm very grateful. I didn't know her personally all that well, so my memories of her are of her being in these endless meetings, in which one of my images is that she was Sphinx-like. I actually looked up images of that Sphinx. There's a sort of semi-enigmatic mask, almost a smile on the face, that I remember of Jackie sitting quietly on the side of our meetings. She had a regal presence. I think about Helen Mirren playing Queen Elizabeth II, and there's a sense of Jackie there. We all know how brilliant she was at her active listening, and then her brilliant insights to help make us pull our minds together at the end of a meeting. She was, as we all know, politically very cunning and shrewd. And I also loved her very noble, no-holds-barred determination and firmness to get us where we needed to go. Of course, there was an extraordinary intelligence and street smarts about her that could get us crazy folks to speak to each other and listen as well to each other. But of course, what I miss the most and what I love the most in Jackie was her heart. She gave, as I said, my group, particularly the group of the costume designers, and talk about peripheral, we really were, but she gave my field, both costume and theater, a sense that we were significant, and that she, a regal queen, recognized us. We all love her so much for that. Thank you.
My name is Carol Angus. And Kiki, I just want to say to everyone, if you haven't had an opportunity yet to look at some of the photo boards that are up, there's a wonderful photo board of Jackie's retirement party and of the wonderful hats that you made. The costumers made. I don't mean you personally, but I mean the costumers made. And oh, it was just a glorious time. And Jackie looks so happy in every hat. You might say that I owe my job at 5 colleges to Jackie Pritzen. In those days, Pat was at the helm, and his 2 academic lieutenants were Jackie and Lorna. I had applied in late 1983 for a new position as coordinator for information and publications, which at that time featured a series of joint course listings. Sounds simple, right? One of the earliest forms of cooperation. Nothing about those course lists was simple. In fact, Jackie was largely responsible for bringing them into being by convincing a large number of departments that they would not lose their identity or their integrity simply by having their courses listed in the same publication as those of 4 others. I will not regale you with the details of the process required to assemble those listings once a year, though I think I have a sympathetic ear over there. Save to say that one of the abiding complaints had been about the covers. So as a final step in my interview process, Pat had asked Jackie to give me a test, a kind of taste test. So sitting side by side in the burn room, Jackie and I faced a stack of those course lists. And pulling from the pile, Jackie asked me to tell her what I thought of the image on the cover. The truth was, most were dreadful. And so throwing caution to the winds, I told her so. And that's when she told me I was hired. You see, Jackie had taste in all things. And speaking of taste, I also owe her a debt for catapulting me from Peg Bracken's I Hate to Cook book into Gourmet magazine. At lunchtime, when Jackie was not in the burn room meeting with one group or other, she could often be found at her desk poring over a gourmet. Her collection was formidable, and her reputation as a cook was divinely on display on winter mornings after our staff Christmas party, when Jackie would transform the carcass of the turkey into a lovely soup whose rich aroma would waft through the halls of 5 colleges, warming our offices as well as our spirits. But above all, what I remember about Jackie is that she was a great audience for us all. She not only met with the theater chairs and the dance chairs, the costumers and the tech staff, She attended most, if not all, of their productions and performances. In today's program, you will read the reflections by two former theater chairs attesting to Jackie's prowess at 5 college meetings. She saw it all, grasped all the nuances, spoken and unspoken, and used what she heard and saw to guide a discussion veering off course to safer ground. Like the Shakespearean scholar she was, she reveled in the drama and equally in the humor. For us on the staff, Jackie was the place to go with a problem, with a question, with a joke. She knew the history and where all the 5 college bodies were buried. She'd turn a problem or issue around as if it were a Rubik's Cube, musing on all aspects and possibilities of a situation. Gail Porter dropping in to discuss some bookkeeping issue. Her secretary and our catering manager, beloved Mary Field, worrying over the wine order for the lunches, following in the grand tradition of North Byrne, who believed that if you fed people well, they would cooperate better. The estimable Ruth Beebe on locating a particular passage in the Dean's Minutes, all got Jackie's undivided attention and returned it with a full measure of devotion, lifelong. But what she loved most of all, and what made her laugh to the point of tears, were our war stories about good intentions gone awry. And she'd laugh just as heartily at the 10th telling as she did at the first. And the best part was, you knew she was laughing with you. I used to love to tell and then retell her my horror stories. Like the time I borrowed the 5 college van to accompany the admission directors on a recruiting trip. On the way home, I accidentally hit a switch in the van that shut off communication between all the bus drivers and the dispatcher in the 5 college office. And instead broadcast the gossipy conversation taking place in the van to all the buses and to the 5 college office. Really happened. And the white glove story, too long to tell here, but always one of her favorites. An audience like Jackie just doesn't come along every day. She was so special.
I'm Peter Barrick, former dean at Mount Holyoke, then English professor there, now teaching at Amherst. So in some measure, I'm a representation of 5 college cooperation. Jackie, I looked up Jackie's retirement, realized she retired in 1995, which means that I represent, I think, the last generation of the deans with whom she worked. John Connolly, who was part of that generation, is here today. I remember with great pleasure, and the pleasure is untainted by irony, the meetings every couple of weeks of deans and deps. I want you to imagine 5 deans, all admirable, earnest, wise people seated around a table at 5 colleges. Lorna Peterson presiding. People have spoken about Jackie's political skill. Let me mention Lorna's political skill. And the discussion was free-flowing, wide-ranging. People don't become deans by being taciturn. And people don't stay deans if they are lacking in confidence that other people are truly interested, really interested in what they have to say. I know you want to hear this. And we would be going on, not bashfully, and at great length. The wide-ranging discussion, sometimes, especially if the subject was Arabic, moved into the obsessive-compulsive. And Jackie was there in the room, a large, silent, sibylline presence. I heard the suggestion that she was Sphinx-like, which is another alternative, and I didn't look up Sybil, so please don't ask me any questions about that. And she was doing her best, I think, to look as though she'd never heard any of this before. It was never clear what prompted Jackie to speak. at those meetings. Sometimes I thought it might have been a wink from Lorna, unobserved by the rest of us. Sometimes I think it was just her own understanding that it was time. But I remember vividly Jackie kind of rumbling into articulation at these moments, and recounting for us some relevant history, reminding us that there were some facts of this issue which it might be worth attending to as we reflected. So while I want to offer us a poem, it's, though by a more famous poet, it's not as good as Marie Boroff's poem. You have a choice in the Valley. You have to quote either Emily Dickinson or Robert Frost. I've chosen Frost for this occasion, a poem which I think captures, briefly, I assure you, one of Jackie's important Sibylline, Sphinx-like qualities. The first line is about the Deans. The second is about Jackie. We dance round in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows.
I wouldn't have missed this for the world. And following up on much of what has been said, I have say Jackie Pritzen, 1969, 5 colleges. The right person at the right time in the right place. As you read the commentaries in the program, or if you ever were at a meeting with Jackie, you would understand why she was indeed the right person at the right time in the right place. 5 colleges is about cooperation. Cooperation is about meetings. And Jackie was a master of the art of chairing a meeting. First of all, it was never about her. It was always about achieving the goal or goals at hand. To do this, I remember well her instructing me the following. Make sure there is an agenda. If possible, send it out in advance. The first item on the agenda should be setting a date for when to meet again. Because for those people who are going to leave early, you want to get the date set before they leave. Be sure someone is responsible for the minutes. Getting a volunteer is helpful. If no one is available, do it yourself. The most important items to include in the minutes are the chores to be done between meetings and who is responsible for doing them. Get the minutes out in time to remind people of what was agreed to and who agreed to do it. A gentle reminder before the next meeting, a note or phone call before email. Just be sure folks are reminded of what they agreed they would be doing. During the meeting, be sure things move along from agenda item to agenda item, but don't dominate and don't cut off conversation, especially when new ideas are being put forward. Remember, you are there to help foster collaboration, so try to avoid dominating the discussion. All good advice, and coming from someone whose own presence enhanced a meeting. While she didn't dominate, she did lead. With her gentle smile, her broad knowledge and wisdom, and her general goodwill, Jackie Pritzen knew how to engage people, how to make them feel both important and appreciated. She was, without question, a grand master of the art of meetings and of cooperation. Jackie was a master of words as well, as you have heard. She was our 5 college bard. When a dean retired from the Dean's Council, Jackie would compose a poem, the meter and rhyme reminiscent of the English Renaissance poets she had studied, and each poem was full of wit, sometimes evoking laughter that brought tears to our eyes. Of course, she was also a devotee of the Sunday New York Times, of the crossword puzzles. I remember one Monday morning, as was my usual, I stopped in her office to talk about that week's puzzle. I also had the temerity of showing her a crossword puzzle I had created myself. Before I got out of the door of her office and into my own office, Jackie had finished the puzzle. So yes, how lucky we were to have had her here at the right time and in the right place. After the music interlude by by our students from the 5 College Early Music Program, which Jackie also helped to establish. We shall hear about Jackie's impact on our interinstitutional cooperation nationwide. And I want to say thank you to all of you for remembering Jackie Pritzen and all she meant to us, to 5 colleges.
My name is Claire Ramsbottom, and it's a little awkward to stand here because I really only met Jackie once. But it's my pleasure. I'm the president of the Association for Collaborative Leadership, and it's a group, a professional association of higher ed consortium directors that really owes a debt of gratitude to the work that Jackie did. Those of us who work in this association benefit every day from what she did. And as you have heard and well know, collaboration is not something that comes easy to higher education. Whoops, now I'm trying to do this electronically and Across the country, colleges interested in collaborating look to 5 colleges as a model to emulate. And as you have heard, this is in no small part to the work that Jackie did. As the first director of the Colleges of the Fenway in Boston, I've personally benefited from her work. It's very easy, well, not so easy, but I can always say, well, 5 colleges does this. Why can't we? If they can figure out, if Smith and Mount Holyoke can figure out how to collaborate, surely we can figure this out. It carries a little weight, you know? There are many things that we do, and many across the country, and I think Lorna and Neil still see this. The first thing people do is call 5 colleges and say, how did you do this? what did you do, and look for that model. And so you go back to the first person that started that, and academic cooperation and where it started. Upon the occasion of the 35th anniversary of ACL, the professional association, Jackie was recognized as one of the pioneers in our field. We had an awards dinner, and there was awards given to each of those. It was called CIL when Jackie first was part of it, and she really helped propel the organization forward. Larry Dodolo, who was then the executive director of ACL and the director of the Virginia Tidewater Consortium, noted at the awards dinner how wonderful Jackie was in providing advice to those who were new in the consortial business. He remembered her telling him once to relax and learn to live with ambiguity. Ambiguity. Working for a consortium requires patience, perseverance, vision, consistency, humility, and a strong sense of mission, all the while coupled with a sense of humor. While I only had the pleasure of meeting Jackie at that dinner, my sense is that she embodied all of that with a special type of grace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby Stewart, and I've been working here at Hampshire College since 1980. Since 1983 as the Director of Central Records, which everywhere else is known as the Registrar. So, only in Hampshire. But only Tricia O'Neill, my counterpart at Smith, has been with the 5 colleges longer, but not by too much. It seems like yesterday that I was a nervous newcomer. And as the assistant director, I'd been a bit intimidated when I first met Jackie, perhaps because she reminded me of one of my more formidable high school English teachers. At my first official meeting at Amherst College, though, I discovered that our shared goals of facilitating the interchange, fueled by a fine lunch and a wee drop or two of sherry, made for spirited meetings from that day forward. Though in the early 80s, the 5-college interchange was still young, Jackie had already established our registrar priorities. Our meetings focused on students finding courses, registering for them, being easily transported to the other campuses. Since then, our methods and tools may have changed, but certainly not our priorities. In 1980, Amherst, Mount Holyoke, and Hampshire shared one computer, which was housed at Amherst. UMass and Smith had their own systems. Students signed up for 5-college courses with the infamous 4-part pink forms. It took us a full year of meetings to agree on changing those forms, which contained highly sensitive student data. Once, much to our horror, a pile of those completed forms was dropped and scattered to the winds on a campus that shall remain nameless. We matched student key punch cards to course key punch cards, brought them over to the operator where they were punched and then whisked away by the 5-college courier and deposited for processing at Amherst College. 2 weeks later, give or take, we received our printed class rosters. Now Amherst, Hampshire, and Mount Holyoke share the same data management software system. UMass and Smith still have their own. Though it took us several false starts and multiple years of planning, students can submit their requests online. The data is encrypted and secure, and 2 weeks later, give or take, at the start of the term, we can pretty much figure out who's in our classes. Major progress. The top priority, though, and the most lively agenda item championed by Jackie, though, was calendar coordination. She worked tirelessly with our campus calendar committees to establish guidelines. We coordinated breaks and course registration periods and ultimately agreed to begin classes within 3 days of each other to facilitate the student interchange. We've since slipped a bit on the calendar coordination front, but back then Jackie's efforts led us to the ultimate perfect storm. In 1994, we had 5 commencements on one weekend. Jackie and a host of others in the area went into massive event planning mode. developing traffic flows, directing parents on the best timing and routes to get to campuses, how to find a hotel room within driving distance. Local residents were warned to stay off the roads, and local merchants and restaurateurs were ready for the onslaught. I think Jackie's retirement date a year later was no coincidence. So when I was asked to speak today, and I'm honored to do this, I plucked a document from my 5 college registrar's file dated in, it's the notes of our registrar's meeting of June 12th, 1995, which was Jackie's final meeting with us. It was announced that Nathan Therian had just accepted a position as Jackie's replacement. We had discrepancies in the interchange figures. I had asked about problems with the 5 college online catalog, and we were hoping to get things ready in time for UMass's high-tech touch-tone registration system. Mount Holyoke was changing its grading system. Tricia brought up the issue of incomplete grades. We might as well just change the date on this to June 2014. And at least one faculty member had been complaining of being approached by 5 college seniors needing early grades. So Jackie collected that information and wrote a memo to the faculty. But for her, I'll just read this. For her final agenda item, Jackie surprised us all by discussing calendars. It seems that 97, 98, and 98, 99 will be fairly normal years, but 99, 2000, or is that 99 double aught, could duplicate the infamous 1994 with 5 commencements in the same weekend. The advanced planning for 94 may actually have backfired a bit. The press made such a big deal of the issue that it seemed that traffic and businesses were more quiet than usual. The idea of 5 graduations in one weekend may be worse than the reality. In the past, we've had 4 graduations in one weekend with minimal impact. And the most important line, Jackie asked if Smith would mock up an alternative calendar. As I look around the room at many of you have the pleasure of working with Jackie and perhaps the agony of sitting through endless 5 college meetings, I hope you understand that I am sincere when I say that these minutes were proof positive that Jackie Pritzen could run one heck of a meeting. We miss her.
You have to pardon me a little. I'm recovering from a pretty bad cold, so my voice is a little scratchy. Similar to a lot of the other comments that have been made, the first 3 things that came to my mind when I thought about Jackie were a twinkle in her eye, a great belly laugh, and an ability to keep everybody calm. The dance faculty in the Valley came in contact with Jackie early in 1970. I arrived at Smith in 1968, and she came in 1969. And by 1970, there was something called an ad hoc 5 college committee on dance. Also in the early 70s, there's a note from Northburn to us, to the 5 college council, to please keep Miss Pritzen informed. Now, I don't know that, clearly I don't think she had a great background in the arts. I mean, she obviously loved literature. And certainly not in dance, although clearly in physical activity. And I don't know how she felt about being assigned to work with dancers. But I think in her early years, she probably just took on the assignments that North gave her and said, fine, and didn't really quibble about it. So she might have wondered how on earth she got mixed up with these crazy dancers and what she was going to do with us. But she did it with just amazing patience and warm energy. She always kept a twinkle in her eye. She always kept her ability to laugh, and she always kept her ability to keep us calm. So here's who we were at that particular time. We were a group of utterly sincere, driven women with all the appropriate degrees in higher education and with varied artistic backgrounds in dance. At Mount Holyoke, Helen Rogers had been in the original Martha Graham dance company. And already by 1970, she had proposed a dance major within the physical education department. Rosalind DeMille, who had recently come to Smith, had been in Los Angeles dancing with Michael Fokine, who was one of the original members of the Diaghilev Ballet Russe. And Marilyn Patton, who was at UMass at the time, had performed in the company of Eric Hawkins, one of the second-generation modern dancers. Francia McClellan, who's at Smith, she's now known by another name, but you might remember that name, and myself were the new kids on the block. We were housed mostly in physical education and some contacts with theater. And what we wanted in this new reality of 5 Colleges Incorporated was to make our own department. We wanted to uproot ourselves from the departments that we were housed in and form our own department, thinking that we were not very many in number, but if we all came together as one, we would have one whole department. So actually, contrary to a lot of the comments about not cooperating, the dancers cooperated from day one. We wanted to cooperate. We wanted to be together, and I think that was probably a change and fun for Jackie. From 1970 to 1978, which was the first year of the 5 College Dance Department, Jackie sat with us at meeting after meeting. We were the ad hoc committee on dance, the 5 College Committee on Dance, the task force on dance, and 5 College Dance Council, and finally the 5 College Dance Department. In a note she says, "It's a slow process. Take the time it takes for one institution and multiply that by 4, or actually 5. It was complicated. We were all entrenched in various other departments, and we had to convince them that we could actually leave those departments and function on our own. We were highly developed in artistic and physical intelligences, but as Kiki mentions, that wasn't necessarily something that the traditional academic world understood. So we really had a lot of convincing to do. In the files, I looked at the Jackie files at 5 Colleges, Inc. I found this great memo. And it's in her handwriting, or it's in her print, yeah, it's in her handwriting. And it says, it's to North Byrne, and the subject is Dance Majors, Thoughts, Not Ideas. And it's dated 1971. She says something that was attached, and I don't know what that was, reminds me of a brief conversation I had with, and I'll just say VH, who was a colleague at Smith at the time, in the English department, as somebody mentioned earlier, recently regarding a proposal for a dance major, a 5 College dance major at Smith. A woman in the theater department there has apparently sent a proposal to the Committee on Academic Policy, and V asked, quote, "What is this whole thing about?" I told him very briefly about the Mount Holyoke major, which was in process. Then he confided that the proposal was, quote, "perfectly terrible," end quote, and made no sense. I said that it was a pity, since apparently the Mount Holyoke program was sound enough and did make sense. At least for the Mount Holyoke faculty, Holyoke faculty had approved it. He just shook his head, and we talked about other things. That was A. B, again, this is Jackie's memo. A strong theoretical argument can be made for the study and performance of dance as a separate discipline. But practically speaking, is there enough steam in the valley? Meaning, 1, are the bureaucratic ruts too deep, or too many vested interests hostile? She got it. 2, is there enough talent and scholarship in the valley already to build on? How many more people would it take? 3, is there one among the dancers with skill enough to write a proposal for program and funds and see it through? Love it. 4, are there enough students actually and potentially to support these ambitions? Current signs don't seem very propitious. If these marks and the situation implied in this letter are indications, perhaps these ladies are not very good defenders of their own course, which means it would be very hard to help them very much. Rather than simply file this away, however, you might follow the course of events and sniff around to see if the matter is worth going into. So I love that because it actually summed up the difficulty that we had in the beginning. We had very little support from anybody outside our own little dance group. But we did it, and she stuck with us from the very beginning. in every step of the way, through our discouragement, our frustration, our anger sometimes, she was on our side, or we thought she was on our side. I believe that we won her over, as you all believe she was on your side. And I think by the late 70s and early 80s, when the Five College Dance Department was fully rolling along, she was quite proud of us. She continued to be a great friend and helper and a translator, I think, for us, to all the coordinators. I emailed all of the Five College Dance faculty and staff that were still living and that I could remember and could find that worked with Jackie in the early years, just to see what their memories were. And everyone wrote of her good humor, her complete availability, her supportiveness, and her able and willing guidance through our growing pains. This is one of my favorite comments. Quote, "It was more like, okay, we're all in this together, so let's see what we can do. It was so much less hierarchical then than it is now, and much more fun." Jackie did make it fun, and I really appreciate that. So in addition to the twinkle in her eye, the laugh, and the ability to keep everybody calm, we have enormous gratefulness for her graciousness and her patience and her skillful guidance in guiding us to make the Five College Dance Department now a model department in the country.
Hi, I'm Nina Scott, Spanish Department at UMass. It's kind of nice coming at near the end because I can resonate with what a number of you have said, and I like that very much. I came to UMass in 1968, so Susan and I go back to about the same amount of time. I knew Jackie Pritzen since her arrival at Five Colleges in 1969, principally through her work with the Latin American Studies Council. I absolutely loved serving on that council, as back in those pre-email days, the meetings provided contact with other colleagues and first knowledge of symposia, new courses, coordinating courses, guest lectures, etc., that were scheduled at the other campuses, and then when we would diffuse all this information to our departments, it was just wonderful meeting with all of the different colleagues. Jackie attended many of those meetings and was always a source of practical suggestions. And by what all of you have said, I kept thinking, this woman's life must be one long meeting, which was pretty much what it was. And I always marveled at her calm and her patience, not to mention her God-given sense of humor, which all of us have mentioned. The only times that I recall her sighing and rolling her eyes was when she recounted attending meetings of deans and deputies. But even here, she was the soul of discretion. And Peter Barrick, I am very grateful to you. I'd never heard her refer to this as deans and deps, but this immediately triggered something in my head. I'm a native speaker of German, and a dep in German is mostly referred to as a Dorfdepp, which means a village idiot. I wish I could tell Jackie that, I really do. A high point of the Latin American Studies Council for me came during Con Nugent's turn at the Five College helm, for he made it possible for us to invite an eminent scholar in our field to come to the Five Colleges for about a month. I was president of the council at that time. I remember that meeting really, really well because Con came in, and of course Jackie was there, and he said, okay, now, can you think of anybody you would really, really like to ask? And I knew exactly whom I wanted to ask, and because I got in there first, I got whom I wanted. And that was Elena Poniatowska from Mexico, and I don't know how many of you know her. She's utterly delightful human being, and she was just a couple of months ago awarded the Cervantes Prize for Literature, the equivalent of a Nobel in Spanish language literature. Jackie made an awful lot of good things happen during Elena's visit, such as allowing both Elena, who was a journalist as well as a writer, and me to attend Nadine Gordimer's press conference, which I think Stephen Klingman, you had a little something to do with, right? And it was very small and very exciting. And I was sitting there next to Elena, and who went in there, you know, went for the jugular on questions. I remember her asking Nadine Gordimer and said, when you were awarded all this money, and Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she said she was going to donate it to something. Or whatever, a very good cause in South Africa. And so Elena said to her, well, do people always, because you're a woman, do they ask you to donate your money? And they didn't know what to say. And Elena said, well, because I know, for example, Octavio Paz in Mexico, he's never asked, is he going to, donate his money or not? To me, Jackie was a rock. She was smart and efficient, and as all of us will say, she cut through the underbrush and verbiage with tact and skill. I was very sorry to see her retire, although she richly deserved a rest. I was honored to be selected as the third Jackie Pritzen lecturer in 1997, and I gave a lecture that she absolutely loved. And I did not know about her background in English literature. Thank you, Marie, for that. I had no idea, but I was working on Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, and I wanted to do a presentation on other smart, feisty women of the 17th century, and came up with all kinds of wonderful lines. And the one I really love was said by Bethsua Macon of England, 1608 to 75, who remarked, and I quote, "Had God intended women only as a finer sort of cattle, he would not have made them reasonable." Jackie loved it. And by the way, cattle is capitalized in that sense. I saw Jackie last summer at her retirement home in Northampton at a memorial service for a mutual friend at her retirement home. I had lost track of her, and I was absolutely delighted to reconnect. I always meant to contact her again, and now it's too late. Moral of the story, if you want to carry through on a good intention, do it now. God bless, Jackie.
Thanks, Nina. I want to say the good intention is if you have not given anything, in fact, if you have given anything to the Pritzen Fund, you should do it. It's extremely important as one of the only ways that an organization like the Consortium gets revenue to do the things that everybody here has been praising Jackie for being so crucial in helping it do. So the Jackie Pritzen Fund, really crucial. My name is Peter DeRico. I came here in 1970 to the university. I was part of a move that was designed to do something to cross the barriers of academic life, to create something new, a new way of teaching about law, and had the good fortune to have some fairly high-powered people at the top. It was the Kennedy administration remnants. Robert Wood was president. Adam Yarmolinsky was part of the president's office. Peter Edelman was vice president for academic affairs. So in the period of about 3 years, we created something that was the first real attempt to say that law is something that's part of the humanities, part of the long tradition of the universities going back to Bologna, not just something for professionals. We struggled mightily against all the things that you are all familiar with in terms of academic barriers to new thinking. And we accomplished it, as I said, primarily because we had a lot of weight at the top, pushing people around, basically, including deans and others. When I had the great good fortune of encountering the 5 colleges, I realized that there was a kindred spirit. There was somebody here, not just somebody, there were people. North Byrne was one of them. He was connected to the administrative assistant that we had for legal studies, who was a retired Army colonel whose wife, Jean Shepard, had been in the OSS with North. And so there were some personal connections moving around. But when I met Jackie, I knew that I had met somebody who was sort of the jewel in the crown. It was very clear to me. And it didn't lead just to the law piece moving out beyond the university, but it led to the amazing development of a 5-college Native American Indian Studies program. And I remember, I can still see her, I was in her office, and she said, "You need to talk to Barry O'Connell and Neil Salisbury." She was very clear and precise in her directions after she had listened, as everyone has talked about. After she had listened carefully and thought through all of the difficulties, she knew exactly which people to put together. She knew because of their intellectual interests and their personal abilities that they would make a good mix. And it has allowed me to think that really Jackie's talent was alchemy. She had a way of transmuting the base metal of academic arrogance and ego and paranoia into intellectual gold and to artistic gold. And she did it over and over again. And all of us who have been here and been part of that have benefited from it. And it's because of that being able to be continued through the fund that I encourage all of us to continue to support that fund. One quick little note. Oh, I guess two notes. I didn't know so much about her cooking. I really missed out on that, I can see now. But I always had the sense when she was just in her physical presence, I kept thinking of Julia Child somehow. And now I know why. There's something other than just the physical presence. In 1973, Professor Robert Strauss at the University of Kentucky Medical College wrote a little piece in Science magazine called Departments and Disciplines, Stasis and Change. And he laid out what I think is the blueprint for understanding what it was that Jackie was about, that 5 colleges was about, and that doesn't happen without something like the 5 colleges and without people like Jackie Pritzen. Professor Strauss's entry point into the discussion of departments and disciplines was the danger from without, the universities that are being attacked by anti-intellectual politicians and movements. But he said that greater than that, and more insidious because we tend to ignore it, those of us who are the inside, and think we're just some kind of privileged position, more dangerous than the attacks from the outside are the intransigent barriers that are constantly being defended inside the university. And so in this little article in Science magazine, he not only called for the kinds of collaboration that Jackie was all about, but he said in the absence of that, the intellectual environment and the academic project will collapse under its own weight. And I think that that is actually true. And I'm just going to say again that I'm thankful that I had the honor, the privilege, the pleasure of working with Jackie and with all of the people that she put me in touch with, each of us in some way finding out what we were most interested in is what we could do. And that what she was able to do through that Sphinx-like quality, which I also recall so well, that careful listening, that ability to move in treacherous waters, was always culminating in allowing us to be honest with ourselves and with each other, saying, yes, this is really what I'm interested in, this is really what I want to do. And Jackie would take I'm sure, the deep pleasure of knowing that one more group of people was doing what they really wanted to do and what they would be best at. Thank you.